Good evening. We are Tangle Time. This is our third episode, and we welcome you. This is our new episode of Tangle Time History's Hidden Threads. I am your host, Lydia Istomina, and I am so thrilled to embark with you on this mesmerizing journey through the annals of history with all of you. And every month, we will unravel another story, and that's why I hope you will follow our podcast, Tangle Time. In each episode, we will dive deeper and deeper. And today, I invite you to dive into the Turner's family story, unearthing and examining the enigmatic and the astonishing. From the unsung heroes and concealed, maybe even conspiracies, to astonishing discoveries that have remained until now and maybe shrouded in mystery. In today's episode, you will meet our wonderful guest, Gary Turner. Hello, Gary. It is so good to have you in our studio. And in this episode, we will learn something that maybe some people know, but I'm sure that many of us, including myself, we are just full of curiosity. So, Gary, welcome to our studio. Welcome to our Tangle Time. Let's begin. Please introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Gary Turner. I don't live in Independence any longer. Unfortunately, I've lived in Colorado most of my life, but I'm the son of Kenny and Elma Turner, who were longtime members of First Methodist Church in Independence. I grew up in Independence, and I'm also the grandson of Phil Turner, who was instrumental, no pun intended, in getting the Turner music legacy in Independence started and expanded. We'll talk a little bit about that 100-year plus history in Independence. Shall I start?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for introducing yourself. As you see, we already have quite a few viewers who are eager to hear your story. And when you visited Independence first about a month ago, and we talked about the legacy of your family, the history of the Turner's Music Store on the square. You know what? I suddenly remembered that when I first came to Independence, I visited the store that at that time still operated. So please tell us, because that's history of your family, but also it's a history of the whole city and the nation, I would say.
Yes, my family had the privilege of being very integrated with the city of Independence for over 100 years. But that's not where the story starts. The story starts in England, and we'll start it with my great-great-grandfather, who had 13 children with my great-great-grandmother. And the interesting thing about he was a hatter in Bristol, England, and a coal miner in Yorkshire. I have no record of him being a musician, but when they immigrated to the United States, they didn't have much money, and he smuggled himself into the ship in a piano crate. So he must have had some connection with the musical industry to get it inside a piano crate. And he journeyed across the Atlantic Ocean with his family bringing him food and him sneaking out of his piano crate. He made it safely, and they docked at Ellis Island, were processed there. And then the 13 of them traveled to Michigan, to Iowa, to Nebraska. Many of them split up and settled in other areas. But ultimately, he brought his family to Independence. Actually, one of his sons and himself came to Independence. Phil Turner Sr. is my great grandfather, who brought his family to independence. He was married and to Sophie Turner, and they had, I believe, 8 children. A lot of kids back in those days, and the interesting thing, one interesting tidbit is that my family name, my paternal family name, is Farvis, Farbis, which didn't have much gravitas in England, shall we say. And my great-great-grandfather, his name was Moses Farvis, and he married Sophie Turner, and he changed his name to Thomas Turner for an unknown reason. There are several legends about this. One was that he was AWOL from Queen Victoria's personal bodyguard, because the personal bodyguard was not supposed to be married, and he was married and had children. Another legend is that he possibly wanted the Turner name because it had gravitas in England, and his wife, being named Turner, had a long history in the English Army. Her father was a major, his father was also in the English Army, and so forth. So we don't know whether he was AWOL or if he was just wanted to have a better name with a coat of arms. But anyway, we ended up Turners, and there are only two individuals named Farvis in the world that remain. They're in England. So we're about to lose the Farvis name.
Yeah, and this is a wonderful, I think, secret revealed, first of all, about the family name, how it came about, and also that it is quite a rare name. I use the moment to introduce our co-host, Ted Whitmire. Hi, Ted. Thank you so much for joining us, and I will give you a chance to greet our viewers before Gary will continue.
Yeah, hello everyone watching, and hi Gary, nice to meet you. It's good to hear some of your story. Sorry I was a little late doing parent-teacher conferences at school today, but thanks for sharing with us. Really fascinated to hear about the history of our members at First UMC. So sounds like you've got great stories to tell.
Yes, thank you, Ted. Okay, Gary, so please continue. We just can't wait.
Okay, well, the Moses Farvis family grew up, and they split up. They went from, well, one of them went to Australia, one of them went to New Zealand, and others scattered throughout the United States. None of them returned to England, but my great-grandfather, Phil Turner Sr., was one of Moses Farvis's sons, and he traveled through the Midwest. He went to, and he became a musician. It's not exactly clear to me how he became one, but he went to Gothenburg, Nebraska, where he started a city band. He went several other places and started bands. In the early 1800s, in 1892, to be specific, he played baritone for one season with John Philip Sousa's band. So he must have been quite good. I wish we had some recordings of that. But he ultimately ended up in Independence because of his connection with the RLDS Church. He was a devout RLDS member, as was Moses Farvis and Sophie Turner. And they came to Independence because of the importance the RLDS Church has to independence. My grandfather, Phil Turner, was born in 1898 in Illinois. Before they moved to Independence, they moved to Independence in approximately 1900. And that's where the legacy begins. That's where the musical story begins in Independence. In Independence, there were a number of bands around, and my family had a, let's see, how do I advance the slides? Are the slides visible?
Let me, yes. Yes.
There we go. these are the four people that are key in the 100 years of Turner music and independence. Phil Turner Sr., as you can see, that's when he was quite young, of course. Phil Turner Jr., who was known as the Music Man in Independence. My father, Ken Turner, who was a keyboard player primarily, but he played everything. And he was quite active in Independence First Methodist Church. And my mother, who passed away in 2003. My dad passed away in 1989 from cancer. Unfortunately, his life was shortened by the big C. And I put my mother up there because she was not a musician, but she was very important in Turner Music Company, supporting my dad and making my sister and I musicians. Now, my sister is Janice. You'll meet her later in the slides. But do I control the slides? There we go. There's John Philip Sousa in the band. Whoops. Where are we? Oh, there we are. Okay. John Philip Sousa, or I'm sorry, here's John Philip Sousa right here, right there. Can you see my arrow?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, that's John Philip Sousa. There is my great-grandfather, Phil Turner Sr., and there's a blow-up of where he is. We have no other evidence of him in John Philip Sousa's band. In Independence, there were a lot of bands. And this is the Turner Family Band in 1904. Phil Sr. is on the tuba back here. John, his first oldest son, is on the alto right here. Roy is on the, baritone.
Yep.
There it is.
Just a second. Okay.
Okay. And let's see. Let's go back. I got to move. There we go.
Oh, that's a tuba that you have right behind you.
Yeah, this is my grandfather's tuba.
Oh,
You'll see
wow.
pictures of that. In fact, you saw the picture of it on the first page.
Uh-huh.
So this is the first Turner Family Band. They started and played in the R.L.D. Stone Church band. Phil is on the trombone, Phil Sr., and Roy, his second son, is right there. He played cornet in the band.
Mm-hmm.
And later on, Phil Sr. took over directing the band. Well, the Turner Family Band played all over Independence. There was no store at the time. They just enjoyed playing. Phil Turner Sr. Was never a professional musician after that. He just was an amateur musician, and he raised his family to every one of them be a musician. This was he formed the Turner Brass Quartet in 1912, and it performed through the 1920s. This slide shows the other instruments they played too, but it was primarily a brass quartet. This is my grandfather, Phil Turner, that we'll talk a lot more about. Whenever you see a tuba, you'll expect to see Phil, except for one picture.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Here's the Independence City Band, where the Phil Jr. played the tuba in. My grandfather played the tuba in. There's his brother John and Roy as a French horn player. And some people in Independence might recognize the Hammondtree name. In the early 1900s, Fred Hammondtree was quite a musician, and he directed the Independence City Band. One little interesting side note here. See this guy with a big hat. You really can't see him very well, but he was the local. Oh, this was taken at the courthouse on the square, and before it was remodeled. But this guy was the local character that hung around the courthouse, and I don't know his name, but my grandfather always called him the guy in the big hat. So John Turner joined the he joined the American Expeditionary Force Band in 1919. I don't know which one it was, which one of these individuals John is, but the Turner musical family had some history with John J. Pershing and the American Expeditionary Force. This was taken in Germany, this photo. In the 1920s, my grandfather, Phil, became an adult. He was married. My father was born in 1921, and his sister was born in 1923, I believe. But Phil started playing in the Kansas City jazz scene. This is a picture of him on the tuba, playing in the Leo R. Davis Orchestra. They were part of a jazz rotation on WDAF radio, playing in the Nighthawk series of jazz bands in the early 20s. If you study jazz, the Kansas City Nighthawks were quite well known. In 1926-27, Sniovar, that was a resort north of Kansas City. I don't know if Sniovar Lake is still there or not, but there were live bands that played up there, and there's Grandpa Turner playing the tuba. He joined the WDAF radio house band. Every radio station had a house band that performed regularly on scheduled programming, and you can't recognize Grandpa in this because he's not using his tuba, but he is the sixth from the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's Grandpa Turner. A lot of people, I imagine most of the people that are watching are not old enough to remember when his hair was his normal color. He was a redhead. So we have a lot of redheads in our family. Phil, my grandfather, played also in the Garden Theater in Kansas City, down at 13th McGee. It doesn't exist any longer, but he played in several other theater orchestras in the 1920s. In the early 1920s, in addition to this work, he worked for Jenkins Music Company. He knew Mr. Jenkins quite well. He left there. I'm not going to share that story because it's a little strange. But he left Jenkins and went out on his own. But that relationship with Jenkins Music was important to his later life. That's why I mention it here now. Where are we? Okay. Yeah, Ken Turner, my dad, enters the story in 1921. By 1926, he had a solo piano recital. So he was 5 years old, or 6 years. No, he was 6 years old and had a piano recital of his own.
Wow. So is he like a music prodigy?
Yes, he was a music prodigy.
Wow.
You'll hear more about that a little bit later too.
You see, that's what as our podcast is for, to reveal secrets and to unveil the mysteries that people even don't know. So the child at 6 has his own recital.
Yeah.
That's unusual. Okay.
Yes, I started piano at age 5, and there was no way that I could have had a recital. I was obviously not a prodigy.
Yeah. Let me introduce you before we continue. We have quite a few viewers here. Nick Vedros, and he says, amazing story. Then Rose Fulton says, hello to Janice and Kathy from Ross. So people are really eager to hear your story.
Well, it's great to hear from those friends. And Nick Vedros is part of the story. He will, as are the Fultons, but Nick is also part of the story, and I'll get to that later on.
Okay, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
So So that's the 1920s. In 1936, we'll jump up to 1936. Phil started the William Chrisman Band. This is the first band, and it was not a subject. It was an extracurricular. Those uniforms, they might look kind of familiar. They look kind of military.
Yes, they do.
They didn't have any uniforms for the band, so he borrowed them from the ROTC detachment. So that was their uniforms. My father, Kenneth, played the bass drum. He's right back there. You can't really make out his face, but he was in the band. When he was 15, in 1935, a year before this was taken, my dad won a national competition, kind of like American Idol, that the Fred Waring Orchestra sponsored, and the grand prize was becoming a traveling musician soloist with the Fred Waring Orchestra. My dad won that competition and was invited to travel with the Fred Waring Orchestra, but his mother wouldn't let him go because he couldn't miss school. So he was still in school. So that decision probably changed his life, because if he had had national recognition, he probably would have gone on to maybe the Lawrence Welk Show. Who knows? He was an outstanding musician, and those of you online that have heard him play know what I'm talking about. Okay, the next slide. Well, the Turner family bands expanded. You can see on the left, they got together primarily at Christmas time. You can see the Christmas tree in the background. This was my great-grandfather's house. We'd always gather Christmas Eve, and I can remember going there before he died in 1953. In 1945, this is the Turner family band. You can see my dad's missing because he was in the Navy at the time. But great-grandfather Turner is in the middle, and Phil is holding his tuba. That's not this tuba.
Oh, not that one. Okay.
I'll tell you, there's a story about this tuba.
Okay.
Well, there's stories about everything.
Yes, absolutely.
That's not this tuba. Now, in 1952, my dad is there. There is my dad playing the accordion. He's back from World War II, and the family band got bigger. You can see there's someone there. There's my cousin Kent, who's a great trumpet player. He plays down. He lives in Branson now, and he plays in some of the theaters down there. He is really a good trumpet player. So, moving on, in World War II, my dad joined the Navy band, and he was first stationed at the Olathe Naval Air Station, but in 1944 they shipped him out to the Aleutian Islands on Adak Island. There was a large Navy and Army base there, with the intention of stopping the Japanese from going from island to island and making their way to Alaska. The Japanese did take a few of the Aleutian Islands, but they never, there was a big battle at an island called Attu that stopped them, and they lost and they left. But my dad was at Adak. He was a part of, you can see there were several Navy band members stationed there, and they formed different groups and played to entertain. They entertained the troops that were at Adak. This is a picture of my dad with his tuba or his sousaphone at my grandfather's house, my great-grandfather's house, and that was torn down during urban renewal in the late 60s. It was at the corner of Maple and Spring. Not Maple and Spring, Maple and Spring. So unfortunately, I didn't get the picture in that shows the three generations of tuba players: my great-grandfather, my grandfather, and my dad. And my dad was in his Navy uniform, but that was taken the same day as that. So he was gone from 1944 to 1945. My mother went to San Diego before he shipped out with his parents and her parents, and they were married in San Diego. My mother always said she chased him all the way to the ocean and he couldn't go any farther and he had to get married. So that's the story she said, and she stuck with it her whole life. I don't know that that's true. After he returned from the service, he joined the KCMO combo called the Frontier Five. It was technically called Al Phillips and the Frontier Five. I'm not sure why Al Phillips got head billing, but he was the violin player here. And they traveled. Dad was in the band or the combo until about 1952 when he left. And I think that was about the end of live bands on Kansas City radio. They were one of the last live bands on Kansas City radio. I remember going down to the studio when I was 3 years old, and my dad holding me up to the microphone and telling me to say hello or something. But they traveled to New Orleans and performed in 1950. And 1948, they traveled to Cheyenne Frontier Days and met Hopalong Cassidy. I have another picture of my dad took the family with him. I have another picture of me in 1948 with Hopalong Cassidy. He was my favorite. So,
question I have: do you remember what kind of repertoire did they play? So, what kind of musics?
Well, they played kind of Western music, but it wasn't country Western as we know it today. It was Western music as it was in the late 40s and 50s, which was a little toned down from today.
Okay, so before you continue, we have a question. In 52nd, 52, did he get into the Studebaker dealership?
Yeah. When he left the Frontier 4, he said he was in his handwritten life story. He said he was just so burned out playing music, he couldn't go on. He played some days when he was an ADAC, he played 20 hours a day.
Oh, wow.
And he was just worn out from music. And so in 1953, he opened the Studebaker dealership called Lund Motors, which was for my mother's family, because 2 of the 3 of the owners were his brothers-in-law from the Lund family. Interestingly enough, it was about 100, maybe 200 feet from First Methodist Church. Is that, what street is that goes up to the square? Maple? Yeah, Maple.
One is Maple,
Yeah, that goes up to Maple. So it was just next door to the building on the corner. They had that Studebaker dealership until 1958, I believe. And I have a lot of pictures of that, but I didn't include it in here because that's not part of the Turner musical legacy. But those 6 years gave him enough time to feel like, to realize that he needed music to live. And he truly did. So he started a combo in the early 50s to play private parties, weddings around the Kansas City area. And he continued that that small combo literally almost until he died in 1989. It was a few months before he died in 1989 that he had to stop. So moving along, well, here's the combo. There's a picture of it in 1947 before he took the hiatus. That was, it looks like a big band there. And you'll notice the tuba, there's Grandpa Turner playing with him. And they had fun too. In 1947, they were engaged to do this. They played outside somewhere dressed in clown costumes in Kansas City. So, and that was Grandpa Turner, and there's my dad. This is, Nick, in response to your question, yes, it is being recorded. In 1978, this is his band. There's Grandpa Turner. This is his best friend in the band, Hal Merton, who played with him for some 30 years. I'm sure Hal is gone now, but I talked to him maybe right after my mother died about 20 years ago. And he said my dad was his brother. Excuse me. And here's the band in 1962, before Hal joined it. But there's Grandpa Turner. So Grandpa Turner played with my dad all the way through his whole life. In the early 1950s, this is the most recognizable part of the folks that didn't know anything about Turner Music Company. They would see the Phil Turner Brass Band, also known as the Milgram Brass Band, in playing at events all over Kansas City. The upper left one, the 1952 one, was the first parade they ever were in. This is the first time there ever appeared a band. And right up here, you can't see it very well, but there, my aunt, Aunt Betty Turner, is up there. But he performed with his band in virtually every parade in Kansas, in Independence, North Kansas City, Kansas, Kansas City, Missouri, you name it, he was in it. I picked a few of the pictures out. This was from the 1954 Kiwanis Pet Parade, and this is the Phil Turner Boys Band, and basically this sign says you'll never be a juvenile delinquent if you join a band. My grandfather's motto was, teach a boy to blow a horn and he'll never blow us safe. And that was his motto through his whole life. They played at the the Truman Library groundbreaking. There's Grandpa Turner right in the background, with Harry digging the first spade of earth up. Here in 1955, you might recognize this location. It was taken, the photo was probably taken from the steps of the Memorial Building across the street. And there's the First Presbyterian Church. And my dad is driving and pulling the bandwagon in a Packard. They sold Studebakers and Packards. So that was a new Packard at the time. This one was taken in, where was that? Oh, that's Halloween Parade in probably the early 60s. I don't think Grandpa missed any Halloween parades in Independence. He asked me to pull it in his Cadillac, but didn't teach me how to back up with the bandwagon. So my pulling the bandwagon one time in the middle 60s was my last time pulling the bandwagon at all. So that was the only time he let me pull it. I demonstrated I didn't know how to back up with a trailer on. In 1956, he played for numerous building openings, but this is an interesting one because it's the opening of the old Empire Theater, downtown Kansas City. It was opening with the Cinerama. The old people on the line on the podcast will remember the Cinerama screen that wrapped around you. And here he is in 1957 at the Truman Library grand opening. They played there as well. He played for many Kansas City Athletics opening days. This is just one. And he did not play for any of the Kansas City Royals events, but the Athletics he did play for. And here's the 1960s. This is the 1962 Kansas City Boy Scout Roundup down in the Municipal Auditorium with the Scouts surrounding him. And old-time Kansas City folks will recognize Whizzo the Clown. Whizzo, this was the Milgram bandwagon. Les Milgram, who owned Milgram stores, was a good family friend, and he was also an excellent trumpet player. So he would rent the bandwagon and put his name on it. Usually when he rented the bandwagon, he would be directing here. But in this particular one, Grandpa was directing. But Whizzo was also a good friend of my grandfather's. And by the way, Grandpa always said Whizzo was a really nice guy. Here's a 1964 American Royal Parade with my dad directing. It was a little bigger bandwagon. You can see the bandwagons evolved over the years. And here he is with the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Band. He played for the Ringling Brothers several years, and he also played for the Ice Capades. And who else was down there? I can't remember. But there's my grandfather. There's Les Milgram, and this is Merle Evans, the director that traveled with the circus. He hired all local musicians, and he only worked with the best. So he always hired my grandfather's band to play the circus bands. I was down there next to them in the early 60s. I got in and I didn't play, but I can't believe how fast circus music goes and how good you have to be to follow this guy. Well, it was amazing. This is a postcard that my grandfather made showing the two different bandwagons, the small and the large. The large didn't last long. It didn't have great stability, but you can see that this one was taking it down near the music hall downtown Kansas City. This is my dad directing that one. So through the 60s and 70s, my grandfather used the bandwagon all the way up literally till he died. He died in 1980. And he played his last big gig was playing in the Kansas City Royals World Series 1980 parade. And he was so thrilled about that. I don't have a picture of that, unfortunately, but only a few weeks later, he died.
Interesting that as little as I knew before about bandwagons, and now hearing about so many performances and events that include them, it seems like it's a big part of the American culture. And I really appreciate this story from this point that your father was such a big figure and initiator in many cases of such performances, which takes us now to the evolution of the Turner Music Store. If you are ready for that.
Yeah. Yes, I don't know that the bandwagon is in American culture.
I don't know.
It was in Kansas City culture because of my grandfather.
That's even more special then.
Yeah, it is special.
Yeah.
When he died, the Independence Chamber of Commerce bought the bandwagon and planned on using it more, and they only used it a little bit. It doesn't exist now.
Interesting.
Okay, we started Turner Music Company, and we, not me, but after my grandfather left Jenkins Music, he traveled the country. He was a traveling musical salesman. They moved for a time to no, he didn't move. He just traveled, and he got tired of traveling through the 30s and surviving in the 30s and the Depression. So in 1938, he started his first music store. The first one was at, I believe, 213 West Maple. And those old timers online might remember Bet's Jewelry there. It was half of their store. He didn't like it there. And he moved to just off the lobby of the Granada Theater, just a small room. And he noted in his notes to me that sheet music sales picked up when he moved to the Granada. But it wasn't adequate either. In 1942, they moved to 123 South Liberty. You can see the picture there. And it's just chock full of instruments. You can see accordions were kind of big then, and there's his tuba. Then in 1946, I put third store, but I don't think it's the third store. He moved to 310 South Main Street. That's these two here. I edited the caption. I lost what I wanted to say there in the caption. But this is the inside of the store. This is the outside of the store. This sign here is the first neon sign in Independence. Yeah, Tammy Turner Moran is a cousin of mine
Okay.
in Kansas City, Kansas.
Hi, Tammy.
Good
Yeah.
to see you, Tammy. And so that was the first neon sign in Independence. Nick would be interested in that.
I have a question, Gary. You mentioned that there were lots of accordions in the store at that time, and now it's impossible to find an accordion. So, do you know why? And also, I can see why. In your parents' store, you had accordions because your father played accordions, but also I think it was more part of a culture at that time. Am I right?
Yeah, the accordion was used a lot in big bands. There was always an accordion player in Benny Goodman's band, Glenn Miller's band, etc. So an accordion was a key part of the jazz sound, and so that made it very popular. That's about all I know. But from this store, we moved to the store at 405 West Lexington, which is just one block south of the church, coincidentally. And it's still there. The building is still there. But we were in this small part of the building. It was half as big as it presently is, from 1950 to 1960. I wanted to put this one in because that's me. Playing the cornet there. Grandpa entered a store display contest, and my mother contacted some other mothers about having their sons come up. I can't remember this kid's name, but he was a friend of mine at the time. But that's me, and we did win an award. I don't think we came in first place, but we won an award. In 1960. Susan, good to see you too. I think you took lessons from my dad, as I recall. But this is the store doubled. In 1960, they built on this half of the store, and note this note, or this eighth note. That's when the eighth note, was installed. Well, what did I do? Let's go back. That's when the eighth note was installed. It was earlier than that, but we got a new sign there. So we were in that store until 1969. That store had many more studios. It had a recital hall, but it was still small. So my grandfather had a vision of moving into a beautiful new store. And that vision came through in 1969 when they moved to 205 West Lexington. That was the last store that my family was involved in at all. And that was the last store that carried the Turner Music Company name. We had a grand opening. This is the band, of course. Grandpa was directing up there, was music. Then he made some comments, as my dad did. It was an all-day radio broadcast. I can't remember the radio station that broadcast it, but we brought in some nationally renowned organists to play, and all the local dignitaries made comments, including the mayor and the county commissioners and so forth. And I stuck this picture in to show you what the store looked like inside. You might notice these overhangs that kind of camouflage the air handling equipment. There's one there, there's one there. And those are still there. It's now, I think it's a vintage furniture store now. And for years, that note was kept in the basement of this store because I saw it there once. So there was the front. Note that we moved the signage up there, and that was quite a day. It was all of my grandfather's siblings were back there. Here. My mother's parents were here. And there's my dad. Okay. In this store, my grandfather started collecting antique music instruments. The pictures are not really good. I know I have better pictures than this, but I have so many pictures. I sorting through them is hard to get on short notice. But unfortunately, in 1969 or 1978, when the store was sold to the Pruitt family, the instrument collection was sold also, not to the Pruitts, to someone else.
I have a question. What was the rarest instrument?
Well, my grandfather said the most rare instrument was a Chinese stringed instrument. In fact, my sister has it now.
What century? Do you remember?
I believe it was like the 16th century, something like that.
Oh, next time show us the picture.
Oh yeah, I'll have to have maybe Janet, if Janet.
Maybe her. But also along with that, seems like your sister plays. Then we had this question from Susan Bauman, and she took accordion lessons from your grandfather. So remember in the beginning, you showed pictures of family band and how family gathered and played. Is it continued? Is this tradition still alive?
Unfortunately, no, not in my family. Unfortunately, I do have a number of instruments. I haven't played the piano in a long time. I used to play duets with my children for their piano recitals, but I haven't played in a long time. My dad tried to teach me jazz once, and I found out that I was a sheet music pianist. I also played the trumpet all through William Crispin High School and into the KU marching band, and so I still have my trumpet, but my lip is gone. But I had to have music in front of me. I couldn't hear it here, and my son Derek has the gift. He can hear it. And he's a keyboardist. He plays with a local band here in Colorado just for fun. He's an attorney otherwise, but he's never been not in a band. So you can tell who has the gift. We had a house rule in our house. Everybody had to learn the piano.
That's wonderful. Here we had a note that I put a comment from Terry Turner. He says that, of course, about recording. Yes, we will have a recording. And Gary, I hope you can share with the whole family, because this is a legacy and memory for the whole family and for our church. Yeah. Because, when you mentioned these antique instruments, you know how sometimes people collect and they keep it for themselves, not your family. Because now I want you to share with our audience how your family provided quite a few gifts for the church, and one of them was a baby grand piano. Am I right?
That's right.
Okay, tell us all about it. And before that, we have Ann Nicholson. Yes. I don't have the gift. And maybe we can invite you and have you play something and sing. Then we will not know for sure, but not now, not yet.
No. Anne is my sister's daughter.
I'm sure she has a gift.
Well, but I didn't have the gift. Our son Derek does have the gift.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, these I have when they sold the antique music collection. As I mentioned, my sister got the most antique of the instruments. I did get two of them. This instrument here it's not a piccolo trumpet. They have piccolo trumpets now. This is smaller than a piccolo trumpet. It's a D flat trumpet that was made in 1925, and only a couple thousand of them were ever made. They're really intended to be more showpieces than really instruments, but you can play this. The band director here at Fort Collins, I brought it and he played it. He was a good trumpet player. And so That's one that I got. And here's the other one that I got. This is known as a sweet potato or a ocarina. You can see the holes. This one was the first instrument in his antique music collection. When he bought this one, he was 8 years old and it wasn't an antique. He bought this at the 1906 St. Louis World's Fair. And it's for those of you that don't know what this sounds like, I'm not a good player, but let me get my phone. Sounds a little bit like a flutophone, but most of them are smaller than this. This is a gigantic one.
And again, tell us about the origin of this instrument. From what country?
I believe it. Well, I'm not positive. I'm really not. I think it could originate in the United States. I'm not sure. There was a famous maker of these. They're all clay, so they take a lot of skill to make. Here's the name, Teschner, and could be a German name, Teschner. And I Googled him on the web, and he was fairly well known in the late 1800s. So this is a pretty high quality instrument.
Yeah, because it reminds me of some like a shell, instrument made out of shell or in the shape of a shell, and it's more like maybe some ocean tribes make it in the ancient time. But again, I don't know.
In fact, I had one of those. Grandpa had one of those. It was a conch shell, big shell with a mouthpiece in it. You can't play nearly the number of notes that you can on these. But where were we on this one?
Now you started linking it now to the gifts of your family, to the church, music instruments, the gifts that your family shared with our congregation.
Yeah,
the history of the Turner family with the first church. But let's ask, Ted, do you have questions at this point?
It's a little noisy where I'm at. So
yeah, noisy. Okay, yeah, then we will continue. Okay, Gary, continue then. Okay.
We're getting pretty close to the end here. Let's pull the slide up. How do we pull the slide up? Oh, there we go. Okay. This is the new church. I got this off the church's website, but and I wanted to show those old timers. This is what you might recognize as going to the church. I had hair. This is my sister Janice and my mother Elma, and this is my dad. This is one of the church photos taken in the late 60s. But that's what we looked like there. But one of my dad's goals at the church was to get a piano in every classroom. So he achieved that at the time, I think when he sold the store. He also, trying to find my notes here, he donated 2 organs for the sanctuary, not the one that's there presently, but 2 before that. He donated 2 organs because he wanted the church to have the latest and greatest organ. Let's see. And we joined the church in 1960, and our joining was significantly affected by the Fulton family. I grew up with the Fultons when they lived on South Main Street in the old church parsonage, and my family became good friends with Ross Sr. and Marie. And I know they had a big influence on my mom and dad, and that's why we joined. Let's see here. I'm sorry, losing track of my notes. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the memorials you may not know about in the church that were donated. I noticed when I was there visiting, there were 2 banners on the wall that were made at my parents. There are two with the angels and the playing the little lyre, and those were made by an artist here in Fort Collins from my parents' request, and those were donated by my parents to be the Christmas banners for the church, in memory of my grandfather, my mother's father, John Lund. They also, John Lund went to church there but never joined. He was always RLDS, but he went to church in Independence for 20 years probably, and he donated in memory of his wife the remodeling of the pastor's office. In 1991, there are some bell chimes in the church that are both internal and external, and in 1991, my mother bought them in memory of my dad. She wanted to hear them be able to hear them from our house on South Liberty Street. Unfortunately, it played for a while, but there were just too many midday chimes being played up there, and I don't think they're played outside any longer. They're played inside though. And then in 2004, after my mother passed away, my sister and I, and my wife Kathy and her husband Stan, donated the baby grand piano. It was selected by the wife of the minister at the time. His name escapes me, but she was a piano player, and she tried out all the pianos and got the one that she felt had the best touch. She called me when she picked it out and asked me if it would be okay if they bought a Story and Clark piano. And that put me into tears, because it's just coincidentally that Story and Clark is what the pianos were that my dad sold. That was the top of the line that he sold. So your Story and Clark piano is part of the legacy. My mom and dad were quite involved in the church. We were also involved in the church. I grew up in MYF. Lydia, you saw that I was talking to Johnny Morrison and Ross Fulton after the service a month or so ago, and they were both in Scouts with me. And unfortunately, Ross moved away when his dad became district superintendent in Springfield. But they're both lifelong friends of mine. But we were involved in the Troop 231, Pack 231, when the church had Boy Scout Troop and Cub Scout Pack. My mother was a den leader with Marie Fulton. We met in the basement of the parsonage, just interestingly enough. The next, that's all I want to talk about there. Next slide. This is kind of near the end of their lives. My grandfather went to live at the Groves, formerly known as Rest Haven. I'll always call it Rest Haven. But when he got down there, he couldn't not do something musical. So he organized a flutophone band at the Groves, with the youngest member of that band being 79 years old. So he got flutophones from Turner Music Company, and they donated them and you can see what he was teaching.
May I ask you a question? This flutophone looks a little, but not the tip, like a music instrument, duduk. Are you familiar with duduk?
No.
But the mouthpiece is exactly like of a duduk. But that's what. But I never heard of a flutophone, so I was curious.
It's probably an American phenomenon.
Maybe, but the duduk instrument is an Armenian instrument. It's a folk instrument made out of a cherry wood, but this one is a little different, but the mouthpiece is exactly the same.
It might be a descendant of that.
Okay, yeah.
It has a kind of a fluty sound. That's why
okay.
Flutophone. Well, on the right is my dad. Later, he died at age 68. And after he left the store, he continued with his combo, and my grandfather played with him in the combo until Grandpa, well, they played a dance a week before Grandpa died in his combo, and my dad continued playing in the combo until he died. But he enjoyed teaching the organ. This is his organ. I have it downstairs here at home, and he didn't play the accordion so much because it took a lot of strength.
Mm-hmm.
And even when he played his gigs, he played something called a synth accordion that you saw on the first slide.
Mm-hmm.
It's a electronic version of it's an organ accordion combination.
Mm-hmm.
If you pull the baffles apart, the bellows apart, you get an accordion sound. If you didn't, you left them still, you get an organ sound. You get both sounds if you had both going. But he loved that because of its flexibility. He could play anything. So he played at men's club meetings, at Boy Scout meetings, at the church, and just loved to play. He loved to play. And this is where Nick Vedros comes in the Luma Sign Museum in Kansas City. You can see the musical note, which was really a signatory sign for Turner Music Company. It was on the last store. There's a close-up of it. And it deteriorated for many years after the store closed in 2003 to the point it looked like this. And the Lumi Neon Museum became key in it through a donation made by Nick, I think it was a neon sign vendor, was it, who came across it? I can't remember exactly how he got it, but he donated it to the Lumi Neon Museum because he thought it was an iconic sign in the Kansas City area and probably remembering the bandwagon. But they restored it fully, and there it is after restoration. Soon, you may have heard of the Penway Point Entertainment District that's going in near Union Station with a big Ferris wheel that's included in it. The sign is going to go in a musical alley, Neon Alley, just on the other side of this rendering. With about 70, there it is. Randy Steinmetz donated it. He is a very talented neon artist. So the sign is going to be going into the Neon Alley down there, and it'll be right in the middle where everybody can see it. So when the Penway Point Entertainment District opens, be sure and go down there and go down Neon Alley. And I was going to play some music, but the file size is too big. So if anybody would like some of my dad's music, I have recorded MP3 recordings of a number of his performances, because he just happened to put a cassette recorder out in the front when he started playing. I have about 50 cassettes that he recorded. So that's the end of the story. I hope I'm still encounter folks that remember Turner Music Company after it's been closed for 20 years now. But they remember my dad and my grandfather. I always thought I would come back and take over the store, but it was not to be. So, is there any questions or anything I can?
So this one, a few comments that came. One from Nick Vedros. Yes, Randy Steinmetz donated it, and also from him. Also, he's a top neon shop. Did you see this one? His daughter Olivia did the new neon tube band. She did a wonderful job. Then we also have from Ross Fulton, Alan and Venny Pruitt. Venny recommended the story on Clark. Also from Scott Kiddle, would love to hear his music. Yes, that would be maybe next episode that we need to hear that. We have another comment, Gary, from Josephine and Richard Land. Great to hear everything, Gary. Very interesting, and learned a lot that I did not know. Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you, everybody who watched us today. And your story, Gary, is something that people need to hear. And if you collect more pictures, we will be happy to host you again. And because the legacy of your family is should live on.
Yeah, but
And
it's kind of funny how within just a few blocks of First Methodist Church, my whole life unfolded until I moved to Colorado, of course.
here, of course, then another one from Nick. Lumi, right? Neon Museum has 85 neon signs from around Greater Kansas City, including the Stephenson restaurant. So, who now has your family music store sign?
Lumi Neon Museum.
Lumi has it. Okay, museum. Okay.
That's
Then
one of the
a trip down memory lane. Yeah, Randy, thank you. And Ted is back with us here. Rose says, Rose, loved it, Gary. Brings back so many memories. You mentioned quite a few church members, and that would be wonderful to get you all together in a studio and hear how you share your stories. And I think we can make it happen.
Well, we had in our MYF group, which was quite active, we get together. We have reunions every once in a while at John Morrison's house. Most recently, was it last year or year before last? We get together. So next time we could maybe do it live.
You mentioned last time when you were when I've met you first time at the church that you come to Kansas City once a year for this reunion. So that's another thing, Ted. Isn't it a fascinating story today?
Yeah, I really enjoyed what I got to hear, Gary. So thanks for sharing that. And like it's recorded, so we can go back. I'm gonna get the parts I missed, but it was great to hear about the history of independence. You know, William Chrisman, I went there too, so it was really cool. Your family's connected to that
Go Bear
program. Yeah, I liked the ocarina you showed off. That's actually popularized from a video game, the Zelda video game.
Oh yeah,
that instrument. And I have a 3D printer, and I've 3D printed several of those and shared that with my students. So it's a cool instrument.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, great stories. Thanks for sharing. And I look forward to hearing more. If, like you said, you have those reunions, bring other people, share more of this great history.
Well, it's my pleasure. I was delighted to do this. As you can tell, I pulled a bunch of stuff together. I think it's great that you're doing these oral histories. You lose so much. I wish my father and grandfather had done something like this.
Yeah. We still have comments coming, and we have Terry, and we have from Scott, Ocarina of Time, adding to what just Ted said. And this was an amazing, absolutely amazing show. So people still come in. Thank you, Gary. You are a great presenter. And thank you for putting together such a wonderful resource that will serve, first of all, any museum, because it's such a high quality presentation, also such legacy for your family to begin with, for your memories. And I think you will be just adding and adding material. I want to invite you to our studio, don't you think, Ted, again? And this time I know that we have quite a few people who want to join you to share about the church and your youth time in the church, all the activities. So thank you. Thank you for your time. Ted, thank you so much for your leadership too. We will be happy to have you again. So please share with us, stay in touch, and we will see you again. Thank you, everybody who joined us today. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for supporting Gary's presentation. And I think I will ask on your behalf to send any pictures to you that you will continue adding to your material. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Gary. Absolutely. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening and be blessed.
Thank you. You too.
See you.